Imagine, just imagine, an African-American student athlete handcuffed, and put into the back of a police car. Why? Why was an athlete handcuffed and put into the back of a police car? This athlete drove the same route home from school every day. But this day was different. You may be wondering, who was that track athlete? That track athlete was me. I remember being so frightened and scared, but I was conditioned to finish strong and mind over matter. One track coach constantly drilled that into me. Finish strong, Sivonnia. And I had to find my voice and finish strong in spite of the fear, the anxiety in that moment. But something amazing also happened. Resilience kicked in. Now that's a character trait I developed as an athlete. And with that, I managed to muster the courage to say these words to that officer. I hope you're ready to explain why you detained a student athlete without probable cause. Then I was set free. Now, of course, yes, that's the short version to that past experience. But that, coupled with others, it really haunted me for a long time. But it is the same fear and the feeling of hopelessness that intensified my resilience, my drive in becoming a lawyer. Now, at this point, you may be wondering, we're here for environmental issues. What does this have to do with environmental issues? Well, I hear you and I feel you. But let me ask you one question. What is the first word that comes to your mind when I say social justice? For most people, social justice looks like equal housing. And for others, it looks like my police encounter and worse. And I agree, those are matters of social justice, social equality. But what if I told you that social justice was more? That it also included environmental injustice. And when we're dealing with issues of social justice, we all have a say. Would you believe me? Now, when I say, I don't mean the normal word, S-A-Y, or the tone of say. I mean S-A-E. Which stands for S, shifting your mindset, A, achieving through accountability, and E, excelling through education. But we're going to come back to that later. I do want you to keep that in mind, though. So now that we know environmental issues are social justice issues, what is the one thing that environmental advocates and athletes have in common? It's resilience. Regardless of my immediate fear when I was standing in those handcuffs and then sitting in the back of a police car, it took courage. It took resilience for me to stand up and speak out. And that's what social justice, environmental activists do. No matter how difficult things get, they sport through. And if people in power ignore them, they sport through. When hope of winning the environmental race seems impossible, they still sport through. We know that environmental justice is a sport. And environmental advocates, they are athletes and they regularly condition for the environmental marathon around the world. And although environmental issues may not be achieved or resolved in a day, it takes that same resilience to stay in the race and to finish strong. When you stay in the race, you're sporting for social justice and you are utilizing your say. But the problem is that when we discuss matters of social justice, like environmental injustice, we feel as everyday Americans that the issues or issue, they're just too large for someone like little old you to control. Am I right? But let me be honest with you for a minute. So was I. I remember the day I saw the email from the organizer for this event and it had the subject line, TEDxHumboldtStateUniversity. Oh my gosh, it was sitting in my inbox in bold print because I was too afraid to click it. My heart began to race and I started to feel anxious about whether I was selected for the talk. I had to pump myself up. I said, girl, come on, Sivonnia, check the email. And so I did. The organizer asked me, what great idea do you want to share with our audience? and I told her what I wanted to talk about. But she replied, well, this is on environmental justice. Like so many, immediately I started to feel imposter syndrome creep in, and I said to myself, you're not an environmental lawyer. You've never even spoken on the subject. What value can you really provide to these people? But almost instantly, I was reminded of a previous video that I recorded discussing confidence and resilience on something unrelated to this. But I had to face myself, my own words, on whether I would show up, on whether I would give up easily, or would I do a deep dive and find the confidence and the resilience, like that track athlete who was alone and afraid in the back of a police cruiser and ultimately found her voice. But I realized something. I do have a say. Although I'm not an environmental lawyer, I am a lawyer, and I help protect athletes, business owners, and employees from social inequities. And that's why I've been branded with the nickname Protector of Athletes, because we're all sporting about something. Am I right? Like environmental racism, for example. When environmental issues impact indigenous communities like Standing Rock by running crude oil pipelines through ancestral lands, threatening their water source, I have a say. When communities of color suffer from lead-based toxins in their water, you got it right, I have a say. And when Black and brown communities suffer from the highest deaths caused by COVID-19, which was due in some part to existing air pollutants, yeah, you've guessed it, I have a say about that. And just like any other social inequity, we all have a say when we're dealing with and fighting environmental racism. But it takes strength and resilience to continue sporting for change and equal freedoms to those who have been disproportionately impacted. But you must remember that whether you choose to strap up your laces and begin the race with the rest of us or not, you have a say. So how can we truly utilize the say framework to change environmental injustices? Let's talk about it. So as I mentioned, S.A.E. stands for S, shifting your mindset, A, achieving through accountability, and E, excelling through education. Let's start with shifting your mind. This is going to be good. So what if you had the power to save a planet, an entire world? Sounds impossible, doesn't it? But it's not. Because critical thinkers are change makers. Change makers are resilient people who inspire movements. Then guess what happens? Movements inspire protests, and protests inspire activists, and activists inspire everyday people, and everyday people take action and make change that impacts the entire world. But most people fail to take action. Just a very small step because their mind tells them that they can't. Almost like what I was about to do with this talk, because I almost allowed imposter syndrome to come in and kill my vibe, my confidence. You know, shifting one's mindset takes resilience. But let's pause for a minute because I want to define what resilience is. I've talked about that a lot. So I've done some research and I've found that scientists have defined resilience as the dynamic process of positive adaptiveness with horrible experiences. So, in Sivonnia's terminology, the ability to bounce back. But if we put that in the sports context, it's the ability to finish strong in spite of the trauma, tragedy, or threats that are present. I had the pleasure of serving on a sports panel to educate athletes about self-identity, and there were sports executives there as well. During that discussion, I noticed something. I noticed that the conversations kept bringing us back to this mindset. But what I realized is that many athletes who go on to be successful, they learn to adapt to the world around them regardless of any of the traumas that they have suffered as children, as collegiate athletes, and as pro athletes. They use the resilience launch pad to succeed. Now, as an athlete myself, I know the power of resilience, the power to continue practicing and pushing through the pain of preparation and drills, even when you don't know the outcome. Because the point is that the outcome matters, but it's not the driving force when you're sporting for something that's bigger than you. Social justice activists and purpose-driven people, they do as athletes do. They sport on. But what most people don't realize is that they are athletes too. Think about it. Chances are, if you were ever faced with any form of adversity and you came through unscathed, you rose up with greater resilience than ever before to fight another challenge. And I get it. Environmental issues are large and intimidating, and it comes with the issues that may not be solved in our lifetime, but if we utilize the power of resilience, the power to continue sporting, it will allow some change to be made that we can, or at least our children will, see in their lifetime. So this power, or this lesson of resilience, and the power of the mind, and the ability to take action leads me to the A in S.A.E, achieving through accountability. Now this is important to me because for a lot of people, they may think, well, environmental issues don't affect me. And I've heard this, and maybe you have. That's not my problem. That's their problem. But let's get real, because to change anything, one must first be accountable to themselves and then to others. I think about one of my pro athlete clients who built a beautiful business, but he knew early on that there were issues in his business that he didn't truly understand. And so it was imperative to hire counsel to advise him. He knew he wanted to achieve in his business, but without self-accountability and the awareness that something had to change, he knew he was leaving himself vulnerable to potential issues. So when we take accountability for ourselves, something magical happens. We're empowered to create ideas that will inspire others to do the same. Like California, for example. California is eradicating the negative impacts on the environment because the local government took responsibility and how it played a role in the environment. And it collectively created an idea to encourage its residents to achieve a greater environmental awakening with individualized accountability regarding the assortment of trash and recyclables and food waste. So next time you think, say, or believe that environmental issues don't exist, I want you to do the E in S.A.E. Excel through education. Recently, I was discussing my SAFE framework with the large university's AD around her interest in having me speak with her student athletes. And she posed this very important question to me. Sivonnia, how do you get athletes to listen? Truly pay attention to these critical conversations. And I told her, I said, athletes must know that they have a say. For me, education has always been my say, my trophy, the one thing I could control, my freedom. And in fact, it was education of self, coupled with resilience, of course, that freed me from that police cruiser. I wasn't a lawyer then, only an undergraduate student athlete with no legal background, but it was education. Education freed me. Take Nelson Mandela's advice. He said, and I quote, "Education is the most powerful weapon to which you can use to change the world." So I want you to imagine living your entire life in Detroit, Michigan. And you've always done things the exact same way. You've always used the same tap water, but one day, your entire life, as you've known it, has changed. Your entire household has extreme sickness. Why? What's the reason? Oh, well, you found out that the city switched the water source to the river. And unofficially, the river had been used as a dumping ground for waste. So what kind of waste? Let's see. Sewage, car factories, meat packing plants, lumber, and paper mills. And that's just to name a few. But to know this, to understand it, to empathize with it, and to recognize the racial component. The environmental injustice is to do something that you may not be comfortable with. And that's the education of self. To step from behind whatever privilege you have that protects you from the sorrows that other communities struggle with daily as a result of this environmental racism. Robert Bullard, he's the father of environmental justice, and he said, and I quote, "Protection should not be distributed because of the color of your skin. Everyone deserves a clean, healthy, sustainable, and livable environment." I agree. When we all educate ourselves, we can, together, excel beyond our wildest dreams. And yes, we can change the world. Like an old African proverb says, if you want to go fast, go alone. But if you want to go far, go together. We're all life athletes with the ability to raise our voice, to be resilient, to take action, and have our say. And sport for the equality and freedoms of environmental justice for all. Think of it this way. Everything that we do in life to our planet has a consequence. How we partition people and communities based on the damage that we've done to the environment, it illustrates environmental racism. That's a social justice issue. When communities of color die at alarming rates from the global pandemic COVID-19, that is due in part to elevated levels of what scientists have called PM 2.5, fine particulate matter. That's an air pollutant, also known as a carcinogen. That's due to environmental issues, but it's also a form of environmental racism. As environmental athletes, we have a say. And with that ability is the duty to lace up, get ready for the event, take your marks, set, and push through to finish strong, because we're all sporting for social justice.